Doings of Doyle is sponsored by Belanger Books, home of the best Sherlock Holmes anthologies featuring today's top Sherlockian authors. Belanger Books is the only authorised publisher of Solar Pond's mysteries, continuing the Sherlock Holmes legacy into the 21st century. Visit them today at belangerbooks.com. Welcome to Doings of Doyle, a podcast dedicated to the works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Professor Challenger, Brigadier Gerard, and of course, Sherlock Holmes. I'm Mark Jones.
And I'm Paul Chapman. And together we'll be exploring Doyle's eclectic bibliography to understand more about the great man's life and work. We'll be discussing his fiction and non-fiction, the well-known and the obscure.
And stopping by Baker Street along the way. You'll find out more at doingsofdoyle.com or follow us at doingsofdoyle.com on Blue Sky. Hello and welcome to episode 68. This time, Paul and I are delighted to welcome to the podcast Nick Lane, the writer and director of Sherlock Holmes' The Hunt for Moriarty for Blackeyed Theatre. Nick started his career as an actor before he turned to writing and directing. From 2006 to 2014, he was the Associate Director and Literary Manager of Hull Truck Theatre. Since then, he struck up a long association with Blackeyed Theatre, beginning with Strange Case of Jekyll and Hyde in 2016, and going on to adapt other Gothic classics including Frankenstein, Jane Eyre and Dracula. He's also an accomplished children's playwright, with credits including A Christmas Carol, Snow White, Little Red Riding Hood, and the excellently titled When Santa Got Stuck in the Fridge. But more relevant than Santa for our purposes, he's adapted The Sign of the Four and The Valley of Fear, and his latest is The Hunt for Moriarty, which is touring in the UK right now. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
The first question to guests is usually, how did you become involved with Sherlock Holmes in the first place, and what attracted you to Holmes?
Well, now that's a question that kind of gives me away a little bit because it doesn't start with books. When I was a little kid, I've got a sister. She's 3 years younger than me, and my mum would drop us off on a Saturday afternoon with my nana and granddad. That was her parents, and she'd go and do the weekly shop. And generally speaking, I'd be plonked in front of the telly with my granddad for a bit, or my nana, whichever. Basically, when the wrestling came on, it would be me and my nana watching. And my granddad would be off doing something, colouring in with my sister or doing a jigsaw or whatever. But in the early afternoon, while my sister and my nana were, I don't know, gardening or drawing or playing with dollies or whatever, the black and white film was on BBC Two, because obviously it was World of Sport or Grandstand. Yeah. You'll remember those days.
Oh, yes.
On BBC Two, there was always a black and white film. And I can't remember the exact year, but there was one, and I might be confabulating it. It might be over a series of years, but in my memory, it always seemed to be over one particular year. There was, every week, there was another Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce Sherlock Holmes mystery. And I watched them with my granddad. I loved them. And I thought they were great. And I loved his unflappable nature. I loved his insouciance. I loved Watson's slightly bumbling nature, although I've come to understand Watson a little better now. But I really enjoyed, I loved the way they fired off one another. And so it wasn't until my, I'm going to say late teens or early 20s that I actually read Hand of the Baskervilles, and then I read some of the others, and then I read the short stories. And then when I came to adapt The Sign of the Four, which I'd not read before, it brought me back to Holmes. Wow. And reminded me what a cracking writer Arthur Conan Doyle was. Just a wonderful writer. So that's my journey. My journey went from Saturday afternoon telly with my granddad right through to reading the books.
That's amazing how many people we've had on have gone down that route as well. That's exactly the same as mine. It was watching those Basil Rathbone movies on a Saturday.
Rathbone is responsible for an awful lot and a lot of positive stuff. This is great, and they're just fantastic. It's Rathbone and Brett seems to be the two pathways in. And
yeah, I agree. I like Jeremy Brett. I mean, it's what I love about Holmes. I'm sure we'll talk about this. I'm sure you've talked about it on your podcast previously. I've listened to some old episodes, but is the flexibility within the character
Mhm.
to shape it to different, obviously Benedict Cumberbatch does one thing and it's very modern, and then you've got Johnny Lee Miller with Elementary, he's doing another thing, and then you've got the Robert Downey Jr. movies, and then there are lots and lots of different ways. They're all different and they're all great, in their own way. A fan of crime fiction will find their way to Holmes through some route.
Mm.
Always have a good time, I think.
Mm. And I'm really pleased to hear you say earlier as well about Conan Doyle as a writer, because I do think that this is one of the things that he is overlooked for, probably because he is so good. People just take his style for granted, and because he's so readable. And it's great to hear another writer really big up Doyle's writing and the quality of his writing, because that is part of the secret of the success in the first place.
Oh, beautiful writer. Paints words so delicately, and he has a phenomenal turn of phrase. It can be exciting, and then within a sentence, hilarious. I think some of his, particularly short stories, are delightful because the lightness of touch is and honestly, when you come to adapt it, the nervousness, because when you read something like that, and obviously theatre's a different medium, and I know he did a couple of plays and a couple of Sherlock plays for this, original plays himself. But when you come to adapt it, you think, I need to make sure that not only do I honor the intellectual skill that he had without matching it, obviously, but try and but I also need to make sure that I use words in as delicate and clever a manner, because he's brilliant. And you're right. And I think sometimes, because he is known predominantly for this one thing, people tend to go, "Oh, he's a genre writer," and that's all he is. His three books are great, and he's just a fantastic writer.
Mm.
And so when you were sat there in front of your grandma's telly watching Basil Rathbone, did you want to be a screenwriter? Was that your original career path?
Oh, blimey, I would have been 9 or 10 at that time. I know, and I kid you not, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a robot. And I genuinely thought, no, as a child, I genuinely thought you could be a robot. I'd seen Star Wars, and I loved C-3PO, who was my absolute favorite. And I thought, oh, I want to be a robot when I grow up, which is the weirdest thing. But I always loved writing. I loved writing stories. I had no concept of, and I was in the school plays, and then I got a chance to act professionally, and I did that, and then it was because I was in a bad car accident in my mid-20s, which exacerbated a pre-existing back condition and made my movement more restrictive. And I got an opportunity to write. A friend of mine who ran a theatre company, well-known writer, said, "Do you fancy adapting Frankenstein? And I'll mentor you through the process." And I think the best thing you could say about that first show was it wasn't completely rubbish. It was mostly rubbish, but it wasn't completely rubbish. And you try and get better and develop a style. But no, it was that I had no aspirations towards writing for screen, or I enjoyed writing. It suddenly became my job, and I'm so delighted, because it means I live in my head, and I'm able to tip my head out and see what other people think of it, which is kind of weird. Adapting things rather than doing original stuff, probably very good for me, because it creates a framework and a structure. Otherwise, who knows? Who knows what they'd be getting? But yeah.
So how did you get involved with Blackeyed Theatre?
Well, that's to a friend of mine, Sally. Sally is from Bracknell, where Blackeyed Theatre are based. And she knew Adrian because she used to work at South Hill Park, which is the building where they rehearse and where their offices are. And it's connected to the Wild Theatre, where the Hotel Moriarty opens on Thursday this week, as we record. And Sally used to work Old Truck, and I knew Sal I first met her in 1999. So I'd known Sal 13 or 14 years before I wrote the first version of Jekyll and Hyde for Whole Truck.
Mm.
And Sal saw it and she thought, oh, I need to tell Adrian about this because it's touring quite close. I'm going to bring Adrian to it because I think he'd really like Nick's work. And so it's really down to Sal. Adrian came to see Jekyll and Hyde. He really liked it. And a couple of years later, when Whole Truck changed, I took a redundancy and then went freelance. Sal went, right, let me introduce you to Adrian.
Right.
And within 18 months, Adrian had said, can we redo your Jekyll and Hyde, but for 4 actors rather than 3? And that was it, and the start of a burgeoning relationship. It was great.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm catching on with this the kind of the gothic theme that's running here as well, Nick. And it's interesting when you said Frankenstein was a commission, and then with Jekyll and Hyde and Dracula, are you just drawn to the gothic as well? And was that another black and white movie moment, as it were?
Well, that's a good question. So my granddad loved reading, and I'd read Kidnapped
Mm.
and Treasure Island when I was young, and I hadn't read Jekyll and Hyde, but my granddad had said I'd like it. He had a book.
Mm.
It was like it wasn't a Reader's Digest thing because it was the full unexpurgated texts, but it was the Man in the Iron Mask and Jekyll and Hyde was in one book, and then the other book was Dracula and something shorter. I can't remember. It might have been Dracula and Jekyll and Hyde, and then Frankenstein. Anyway, I had a fondness for that kind of thing. When I was approached at Hull Truck to write Jekyll and Hyde, they said we'd like you to do, because I'd done an adaptation some years before of Lady Chatterley's Lover, and they toured it, and I directed it in 2011, and it did well for the company. And they'd said we'd like you to do another 3-hander because it's cheap for us to do. And what would you like? And I gave them a list of titles, and they were all books that I enjoyed. Teresa Rakan, but essentially they had to be out of copyright. Because they're not paying royalty to anybody else, and so they chose Jekyll and Hyde. I love doing it. The first Frankenstein was chosen for me. Essentially, John Godber, who used to run Hull Truck, who is the friend I mentioned earlier, he was going to adapt it, but something happened in his personal life, I can't remember what it was, that meant that he didn't have the time to do it. And then he saw that because of the car accident, my acting career was maybe slowing to a stop. And he gave me the opportunity, why don't you do it instead? So that's how I did my first Frankenstein. I've adapted Frankenstein twice since, and it's better now. In fact, the one for Blackeyed Theatre was actually a co-adaptation. It is a reframing of an earlier adaptation by a different writer that Adrian wanted me to tackle. So that was 3 or 4 years ago, which is great. But no, I mean, it's not through black and white films, though I have seen a lot of the black and white films that came from the books. But no, it comes from, that literally comes from the source. So.
And one of the ones that you adapted was Dracula, wasn't it? I mean, that's another character who's kind of like Sherlock Holmes, so iconic.
Yes.
You know, was it daunting to do Dracula, or was that something that you were, hate to say it, wanting to stick your teeth in?
It was a fascinating thing, Dracula, because the books and the films are not similar at all, and you will know this, being a well-read gentleman. The book is full of dread and symbolism and darkness and the fear of the loss of empire. There's a lot of politics in it, and I mean, some of it is a little bit unpleasant politically now, but it's a bigger, broader, and richer book. And the films, rightly so, because films have a certain runtime, tend to condense it and go towards what they believe will be popular, which tends to be blood and cleavages, and so a lot of the vampire films are, heaving bosoms and exposed flesh of neck and blah blah blah. Which there's a place for that, and some of the films are great. The Christopher Lee, wonderful, and but the original book, I thought I want to try and bring that Dracula to the stage, and I want to try and bring that story to the stage. And so we did, and that's. But yes, just to answer your question, you've noticed already that I tend to just run right around the housing estate, getting to the point. But yeah, it was really daunting because everybody has an expectation. Everybody has their Dracula, and we had 3 actors playing Dracula.
Oh,
because he gets younger and stronger.
Of course.
So we thought we'd start with one of the older actors. And then when he travels on the Demeter, by the time he gets off the Demeter, he's younger and he's stronger. And then once he's drunk blood, once he's killed Lucy, and then he's younger again and he's So we went younger through the line of actors. Basically, Dracula was represented by the same coat.
Such a great idea.
It was the first Blackeyed I saw was the Dracula in, I think it's 2015 at Harrogate.
Oh, that wasn't mine.
Ah, right. So I need to see yours as well then.
Well, I don't know whether they'll bring it out again. I mean, they made it a few years. John Jimmons was fascinating and quite a expressionistic version of it. I saw footage of it online. I never got to see it myself. But yes, quite different to the one that we did. It was only last year. So.
Right. Well, it was that attracted me because of really enjoying that and the company,
yes.
Which attracted me to go and see the Sign of Four, and not disappointed.
Oh, that's good. Hooray!
Because that was what I loved about that, and me and my partner Teresa were both real Sherlockians, Doyleans, and we were both struck and delighted at how you took the Sign of Four and played it straight.
I think it's too easy to parody. I think it does Conan Doyle's writing a disservice. I'm not saying that some parodies aren't great and they're fun and they're also homage at the same time as being a pastiche, but that's not something Adrian wanted. Adrian McDougall, the artistic director of Blackeyed, and it's not something I want to do either. The Sign of Four has quite a serious story at its heart, and it as a lot of them do, and I wanted to be true to it. It was a set text when I came to do it, and I was asked to make sure we did it chronologically so that it all followed. I wasn't allowed to play with structure at all. And there's advantages to that, particularly if you know the book well, you know what's coming. But obviously the final chapter, not to give too many spoilers away, when I was going to say the name of the guy who does the crime.
You're allowed to. If there's anybody listening to this who hasn't read The Sign of Four, I'd be absolutely astonished.
So when Jonathan Smalls is caught and his confession forms the final and longest chapter in the book, the mystery solving part of the novel is over, and I always felt like in the theatre there would be certain audience members who don't know the book who would go, "Oh, what's this bit then? This feels rather perfunctory or added on," and So but I was pleased to do it, and it was fun to play with.
Yeah, and I think that was your first one, wasn't it? The Sign of Four.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Valley of Fear. You've got exactly the same problem there with a very large reminiscence. So how did you then deal with that in Valley of Fear?
With Valley of Fear, because that wasn't a set text, and also because we'd feared that we lost some audience members because of the final section with Smalls and so on. Adrian said, however you want to do it is up to you. And as you'll know, you've got one half the tragedy of Burlstone, and the other half is the Scourers. They play anti-chronologically because the first story takes place in 1895. Then you go back 20 years and 2,000 miles to the west, and suddenly you're in America. And I just thought it would be a great way to play around with the strands that connect the stories because they're connected via Moriarty. Moriarty is the person who has been tasked with, once you learn that the Scourers were unsuccessful in their attempt to kill, oh blimey, his name's
Bertie
not on here. Don't
Edwards.
tell me. Thank you, Bertie Edwards. Yeah. I was trying to remember his married name, but yes, Bertie Edwards. Once once they realized they were unsuccessful in killing Bertie Edwards, they contacted Moriarty, who basically did the job for them because he's, as he says, as Holmes says at the end of the novel, this is a man who cannot afford to fail. Which is fabulous. And so knowing that those strands were there, it was fun for me to interweave, basically. So you get the tragedy of Burlstone, which at its heart is a fairly it's a fun mystery. It's a when it boils down to someone's hiding behind a wall. But because it is quite simple, it means that those scenes you could really go into the detail of how Holmes works things out and how he figures out the history of the building and so that was a lot of fun. And also, just to go back to my television watching youth, both my dad and my granddad loved westerns. Westerns were a big part of my growing up, and so what I was able to do was basically make a play, which was like a lovely Saturday afternoon watching a Sherlock Holmes and a western at the same time. Fantastic.
Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, I have to say, I thought your adaptation of Valley of Fear was absolutely incredible because of the fact that you were able to merge the two in such a good way. Because, I mean, that fantastic revelation of who is Bertie Edwards, which comes in the reminiscence, obviously you're knitting together at the right time in the story, but you're also telling the story out of sequence. It was kind of alchemical watching it. It was quite amazing because I thought, I have no idea how you're going to play this out as I was sat there in the audience. I was thinking, hang on a minute, you're bringing this in really early. How is this going to play? And it was just worked brilliantly, I thought.
That's very, very kind. And actually, I'll give credit here to Adrian because the first couple of drafts, there was a scene. You know the essay about the difference between shock and suspense? They always compare. It's a thing about Hitchcock with the Master of Suspense. The premise goes: there's a bomb in a closet or cupboard at a board meeting, and shock, you never see it, and then it blows up and it's a shock. Suspense, you cut to it and you see it ticking. You cut back and and then you cut to somebody who knows it's there but can't get there in time. So I've always been a fan of suspense, and Adrian said, no, you must have the Bertie Edwards thing as it occurs in the book, because there'll be people who don't know the book, and so you've got to give them the shock, because the fun is in the shock. Because initially I'd written a scene at the end of Act 1 where Bertie Edwards, who is obviously McMurdo at that point, he's undercover as McMurdo, meets up with the police officer and says, it's too dangerous, you've got to get me out, and I'm struggling here. And he's overheard by Morris. So my version was you'd already know, and it became about how does he stay out of trouble. And actually, in fairness to Adrian, he was right, because I said, I'm not sure it'll work the same way, and Adrian went, no, trust me, it will work if we don't hear it until the end. And you just proved that Adrian was right. And I'm always happy to hold my hand up, which is why I wanted to give him credit for it here, because otherwise it would have been a different play and possibly more disappointing as a result.
I mean, what I was struck by, Nick, was I didn't know beforehand what the structure was going to be, and I'm always interested to see how people work with these stories, and it's great in a way to see it taken away from Doyle's structure, because Doyle pulled the same trick 3 times with his novels. You got the Study in Scarlet, Sign of the Four, and Valley of Fear all have the long flashback sequence.
Yes.
And it was great to see it as kind of intercut in that way as part of the story thread. And we had, one of the party we went with had never read the book, and she said, no problem following it whatsoever, and that it worked beautifully. And so it really it did work for those of us who knew it and those who don't. And it just to take. I just thought the structure was so good. I thought, oh, in a way, this is what Doyle should have done, because it did flow. And once you get into the that's what's going on, it worked beautifully.
That is music to my ears. And please give that person who said that a cuddle. One of the conversations I have regularly with Adrian, because he's very conscious of pleasing his audience and the majority of the audience. And when it comes to something like Sherlock Holmes, we don't argue. It's never that aggressive, but we have a slight difference of opinion, because my opinion on the Holmes novels, you may feel differently, but I'll say what I think is what you are reading is how Holmes has solved it. You're not trying to solve it yourself. The idea is the police are at the end of their wits' end. They have an unsolvable case that they bring to this master, this genius. And he then uses his own special skills to unravel the mystery. And then at the end of the mystery, there's either a rather elaborate and grandiose description of what's happened, or he gets the criminal to confess. And that's how Holmes stories tend to be built. And sometimes, yes, they'll go into Mormon country, or they'll go back to California, or wherever. But I think that if you... I don't want to use dumb them down, but if you simplify to an extent that an audience can solve it, you sort of take away what Holmes is. And that, for me, is the magic. So he and I had a number of conversations with regard to Valley of Fear, and again with Hunt for Moriarty, which we'll talk about, obviously, where Adrian would say, are you sure the audience can follow it? Are you sure they're following it? And my argument would always be, yes. If they listen, they will follow it. I have followed the plot that Conan Doyle has set out. The great thing about Conan Doyle is he works very hard to make sure that when Holmes puts it together, the reader goes, of course. Of course, that's how he did it. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And so it's always about how Holmes has solved it. As long as that makes sense, then everything else will click into place. So, it's been a slight, again, tussle's too strong, but there's been a friction about whether or not we are serving the audience and the writer, or the original, the source material, equally. And I personally think we are. And I think Adrian's gets concerned because every now and again someone will say, "Oh, it was a bit confusing," and my answer to that is, honestly, I've worked really hard to make sure it isn't. It's just there's a lot of information. It's like crime novels, there's a lot of information. You try and follow it along, but if you relax and let Holmes do the work, you have a really good time.
It's a really interesting approach, that Nick. It's as you say, very different to the Agatha Christie type format of you play along with it. The puzzle is at the key, but you also, Doyle is very playful in the way you do get things like in the Valley of Fear with you're pointed towards the dumbbell. And what's going on with that? Or the dog in the nighttime is the classic.
The dog in the nighttime.
Holmes said, but the readers go, what's that all about? So you're given these things, but not in the way that a Christie or one of those sort of novels. It's not for you to play along and guess. It's for you to, they've seen something. But so it is really interesting for you to point out that difference.
Yeah, it's I mean, there are a few examples. The mystery and the title I forget. He's a Russian professor. Holmes has been chain smoking because he wants to put ash on the floor because there's a secret compartment behind the shelf with the woman behind it, and he's been smoking and chain smoking and smoking and smoking. you're never gonna, you just think, okay, what's he doing? Clearly he's doing something, but there's
Mm,
no way you can guess that
Yeah,
until he reveals it.
mm,
yeah,
And if
yeah,
you give audiences too many clues, then it stops being Sherlock Holmes, and yet it becomes
mm.
Christie. Christie
Yeah.
is a master in her own way,
Oh, absolutely.
very
Yeah.
different style,
Mm,
yeah,
mm,
and I think that's a massively important distinction to make.
yeah.
mm.
So you were mentioning there that you've got this tussle, or at least a question, whenever you're adapting about how faithful you are to the original books and how
Yeah.
far to the audience. And I'm just wondering how far that plays into your depiction of Sherlock Holmes, because you're now, we'll come on to Hunt for Moriarty in a second, but you're now onto your third iteration with Sherlock Holmes. Did you come to the character with a particular idea or impression of the character that you wanted to convey?
Look, I think it's really fascinating because when I saw the Rathbone, and again I was a kid, but the thing that struck me was he was unflappable, but he was quite funny.
Yeah.
I liked the fact that he was humorous and quick, and his sparring with Watson was massively important. I think that there's been a movement away from that aspect of his characterization towards this sort of cold, calculating, solving machine, which I don't think he is. There are a number of occasions in the novels, and obviously they're all narrated by Watson, and not just the novels, but the short stories as well,
Mm.
the adventures, where Watson points out, "I never saw him more moved," or "I never, he was as touched as I've ever seen," which suggests that he was moved at other points. He was touched at other points, and I always felt like whatever I did with Holmes, I wanted to make sure that, as clever as he is, as awkward as he can be, as stubborn and as brilliant, there's a human in there.
Mm.
There is a human in there. He's not a robot. I think
Yeah.
if you make him too averse to human contact and feeling, he's not a romantic man. We know this. He said, "I will never marry." It will go against my. He says that's the end of Sign of Four,
Mm.
I think. And also his depiction of Irene Adler. He admires Irene Adler because she's a worthy adversary, and he refers to her as the woman, but not because he admires her sexually or physically. He admires her intellectually.
Mm.
But that admiration is a human quality. There's something about him that I think sometimes people miss,
Yeah.
and that's what if there's anything I wanted to bring, it's reminded the audience that he is human, and he does love Watson. The case of the Adventure of the Dying Detective, where he's put the makeup on and he's trying to catch the poisoner, and he's saying, "If you loved me, Watson, if you ever loved me, you'll stay silent and get behind the bed,"
Yeah.
and those kinds of things. He's not doing that for effect. He
Mm.
genuinely feels that, and I think sometimes people, and it might be because of versions on screen or or popular discussions, tend to shy away from that. So that is definitely the one thing I wanted to make sure his humanity was retained.
That's a very good point. And I think often you get, that humanity in those comic moments. One of my favorite moments in all of Sherlock Holmes is the wonderful bit when the Red-Headed League, where he gets one client, turns up and basically describes how he's been hoodwinked and says, "I went back to the offices of the Red-Headed League and eventually traced them to a manufactory of artificial kneecaps." At which
Yeah.
point Holmes and Watson just burst out laughing in front of the client. And I just think sometimes we forget the fact that they are, they're just very human people.
Yes, yes. I enjoy in The Missing Heiress. Is it The Missing Heiress where he sent Watson to Lausanne, but he's gone after him tonight, just and let him make all the mistakes, and then stops him being beaten up and says, "Well, Watson, you absolutely bundled that one."
I love it. I love it. So your latest one, let's talk about The Hunt for Moriarty, because this is
Sure.
the latest one. It's currently on tour in the UK, as I said at the beginning. And this is a bit different to the other two, isn't it? Because it's a fusion of multiple stories with new content as well, new ideas too. So tell us a bit about, for people who haven't been able to go there, tell us a bit about the play.
Sure. Okay. Well, it was after doing Valley of Fear. Adrian said he'd like to do another one, and is there any that I would particularly want to do? And because because Moriarty is mentioned. I mean, in our version of the Valley of Fear, we did put a scene with Moriarty in there, which obviously isn't in the book, but I just couldn't resist because he is the éminence grise in the background of that story. You know, he controls a lot of the action off stage, really. But it was such fun writing Moriarty, and he has such a place, I think, in people's perception of Holmes. You know, it's like, I don't know, Batman and the Joker. There are certain characters you go, there is a villain. There is, you know, and Moriarty is Holmes's villain. Of course, Sebastian Moran, Milverton. There's loads of great villains in Holmes, but Moriarty is the one that people tend to think of. And I said I'd love to do something with Moriarty, and it might be that we try and get some of the shorter adventures and build a plot. So Adrian agreed. Initially, what my plan had been was to do a portmanteau project where they're on the train heading to Europe or possibly or back from Europe. And the other actors play other passengers in the carriage.
Oh.
They'd be talking about a particular mystery, and then they'd become those characters, and you'd see that particular adventure play out in isolation. Then the train would arrive at a station. Those actors would leave the train, get changed, get on the train again as different passengers, and then a different story would be told, and then there'd be other things. And I thought that was quite neat, and it would keep the story separate, because, you know, knitting three mysteries together means you've got three lots of names, three lots of facts, three lots of things, and do they all are those strands running all the way through it? Do you drop some, do you pick some up, and you know, and so on. Adrian was very keen that we craft I craft a narrative that overarched and joined these mysteries up. So I looked through the canon, and the two that seemed to, well, there were three or four that presented themselves as that could conjoin work quite well together. And the ones we've used in the play are the Bruce Partington plans, the second stain. There's reference to the naval treaty. It's not really in there. And then obviously the final problem. But because those two plays, those two stories are about missing government documents that could expose or fracture the British Empire, or could create. I thought that's a really fun thing to look at, because it means Holmes is protecting not just London, or not just himself or the people that he loves, but you know, the world as we know it at that time. So I decided to set it right towards the end of Queen Victoria's reign. It's set in 1900. I know the marketing said 1901, but it was a mistake. Set in 1900. Queen Victoria is ill, and there's a perceived power vacuum that is going to arrive once, you know, at the time of her reign, at her highest point, she was arguably the most powerful person in the world, because of what she headed up. And so I wanted to have the idea that there were these things that were going on, all controlled by someone with that kind of breadth of strategy, which could gradually undermine and then fracture the British Empire to an extent that it could be controlled and held together by the word of one person. And it was that really that kind of made me go, oh, these are the stories I want. But I also knew I wanted Final Problem, because you have to.
You've got to put it in.
You have to. It's such a phenomenal moment. It's such a phenomenal conclusion. And you get Moriarty. So, you know, he's not just hunting for Moriarty. He's got him. They've found each other. So, you know.
Yeah. And in the process of knitting these stories together, you then create a new story, don't you, to sort of intermesh to link this all together, and how to create your own piece. I mean, how did you approach that? I mean, how hard was it to write something that was in the Conan Doyle style as opposed to adapt Conan Doyle?
Oh, honestly, as I said earlier on, I'm such a fan, I'm such an admirer of his writing and the intricacies of his plotting and his timing. So trying to find something that would not undermine. What you don't want to do is have the Bruce Partington plans and then Noddy in Crime Land, and then something else that's brilliant, and then Noddy in Crime Land again. You need something that has, something that is equally smart. And so the adventure of the Scoundrels Assembly, as we've sort of roughly called it, was an idea that. Because Doyle refers in a number of books to the foreign agents working in London. And I thought it was a wonderful idea to use those characters as a marker of where Holmes is and also the other priceless thing that is said, and this was really the key to it. When I was looking at the stories and I reread the canon, and I got to Bruce Partington plans, and you've got the wonderful section at the beginning where Holmes is talking to Watson about Mycroft. And he says, "Oh, I don't really know your brother. He's only been here once," which is Greek interpreter. But he says, "My brother is the British government. His word has determined policy. Nobody knows about this, but." And I thought, wow, we know Mycroft is a force for good, but Mycroft is, at the present time, Stephen Miller, or previously, you'd be looking at someone like Dominic Cummings or Elon Musk or someone who's got the ear of Caesar, but he's a force for good. And imagine somebody having all of that power, and how would you unseat that person? How would you unsettle that person to get to that power? So I thought, I've got to use Mycroft. I've got to have a thing which divides the brothers and forces Holmes to look in one way while Moriarty doing something else. So it was fun to play around with plot and structure, but also it was daunting because you look at it and you go, Doyle wouldn't do that. That's beneath him. That's rubbish, or that's too much of a stretch even for him. So I had to try and get a balance, basically.
Yeah, but I don't. Well, I know Paul has yet to see it. I saw it a few weeks ago. I thought you'd handled it really well. And the thing that I was impressed by was that one of the aspects of this Scoundrels Assembly is based on the tiniest of references in the Bruce Partington plans, which is the fact that one of the spies is called Piero. And then you have just knitted the whole story out of that. And I thought, that's a bit of genius there, to just basically take that one thing and then spin this story. Very clever, I thought.
Yes.
I was going to ask you about the other thing that really struck me in this, and it does go back to previous shows you've done as well, is that you give Mrs. Hudson a lot of agency. I mean, partly I can imagine that there's almost an expectation to do it, and it could be almost tokenistic, but it doesn't feel like that. It really feels like that you wanted to do quite a lot with that character.
Well, I mean, there's a number of reasons for that. You have to be totally plain and open. Doyle was writing for a particular readership, and at that time when he was writing his books, the female place in society wasn't massively established, and so female characters weren't necessarily as important to his readers. Which isn't to say that there weren't women who had power or agency in the past. The great writers, but I just felt like, well, two things. One, if he was writing now, I feel sure that Doyle might have used Mrs. Hudson rather differently.
Yeah.
And two, when you're employing actors and you have a female actor and you say you're playing Mrs. Hudson, all she does is come on and bring messages and tea, and that's it. She says nothing. It kind of it's a bit disappointing, I mean, aside from which is there's one adventure where she comes and serves. I think it's the naval treaty where she brings the food under the silver platter, and actually the naval treaty is under the platter. But that's not her moment. It's Holmes's moment anyway. So
it is.
She doesn't. She does very little. Oh, and in the Dying Detective, she goes and fetches Watson and says, "I've never seen him quite this ill."
Yes.
Mm,
I mean,
mm,
it's for an actor, you go, well, I'm going to do
mm,
that. It's terrible. But I just felt like there's there's fun to be had having a spark between Hudson and Watson. And also, when Watson leaves, because we know, I have a question for you guys actually in a minute, which hopefully you'll be able to answer for me. Holmes, Watson moves in with Mary
Hmm.
and comes back every now and again, as it says in a number of the stories. He comes back and visits, and then at some point he moves back in.
Yeah.
But um, I just felt like Holmes has got so used to working. I mean, he's worked alone, as we know, but he's got so used to working with somebody. I wonder what it would have been like if he'd have decided to use Mrs. Hudson as his foil.
mm,
Mm.
And that is the implication. I thought, so where would that have gone?
mm.
If there's been 5 years and now Watson's come back, and in those 5 years, Hudson's gone, oh, I can do this now.
Mm.
I'm part of it now.
Yeah.
Part of it to an extent that, you know, Holmes has sent Watson off to get a list of spies, and he brings it back, and Hudson takes it and starts reading it out, and he's working on the maps, and Watson's a bit like, I feel a little undermined here. So yeah, it was fun to play around with. I think it was something that would be um, I would hope that Doyle would approve and would perhaps use the character in that way if he was writing now. And it's better for an actor. So those are the
Mm.
reasons.
Very good.
I think as well what you've just been discussing there, Nick, as well, he again points to the brilliance of Doyle. I mean, we're getting this throughout the interview. Is the source material is that you've been able to build up Mrs. Hudson. You also Moriarty, Mycroft. These are all characters who we're barely introduced to really in the canon, but how brilliant the sparks are
Yeah.
that are there in the first place, that Doyle is able to just use a single sentence or and paint character. And we've got Mycroft. There's we don't get it, but he's so striking. Those few
Yes.
appearances that there's so much can be done. That right, we'll take this character, and you can flesh them out very easily. And Doyle could have done the same if he'd chosen to. That he's so good at character, he can do this in just almost a sweep of the pen.
Yeah, I can't answer that any better than you have.
Mhm, mhm,
Absolutely. He's wonderful at that.
mhm,
He's a master at creating people in a stroke, in an instant. I think it's the missing three quarter. The rugby players that he mentions, and you know him straight away. You go,
mhm,
that's really clever. He's brilliant. He is brilliant.
mhm,
Mm.
mhm,
Now, towards the end of the play, you have an interesting scene where you bring in an exchange between Holmes and Moriarty, and I'm not going to spoil it for the
mhm.
audience, but just to say that you're talking in that scene about truth and power and things of that ilk that will resonate with contemporary audiences, shall we say. Was that something that you had in mind as you were writing it, or was that something that kind of evolved as you were pulling the story together?
Um, it's it. I mean, sort of both. I wanted to do something that what I think Doyle does well. I mean, we've basically been saying Doyle does everything well, and he does. But one of the things he does well, and it must have been that way for his readers, is he took them around the world. He showed them different types of politics, different views, different viewpoints. There's he touches on slavery. There's Freemasonry in there. There's Mormonism. There's the mafia, the Ku Klux Klan. He looks at contemporary or issues that would have been contemporary, and frames them in these pieces of crime fiction, which are far more layered.
Mm.
The great thing about the adventures, not the novels, but the adventures particularly, is if you're wanting to fly through them and read a really good, fun, page-turning mystery, it's there.
Mm.
If you want to look into what he's saying about society, that's in there as well. And I love it. And I wanted to honor that. And I thought, well, what is the thing that is that we are struggling with at the moment. And I think what we're struggling with is the widening gap between what we are told and what we know to be true. And, the person who controls the truth, or the truth, quote unquote, has the reins of power. And I felt like that would be something that, our arch nemesis, or Holmes' arch nemesis, might be well aware of.
Yeah.
So that's where the spark came from. And again, we mentioned earlier about Stephen Miller and those kinds of people, and I find it fascinating, and I think that. But it wasn't just about trying to score a contemporary political point. It was to honour the Doyle's tradition of finding ways to go, and this is happening as well.
Yeah.
And here's the mystery, but there's also this. So that's
yeah, and and it's worth saying that this it doesn't feel crowbarred in at all, because it comes naturally out of the story, because you've been talking, as you said before, about Mycroft's position of power and responsibility, what is actually going on behind it. It all flows beautifully. So I wouldn't worry about how it how it comes across. It definitely worked.
And that's also, it is relevant to the period, isn't it? You've got the rise of what we now know, the newspaper empire. So you've got Hearst in America. You've got the Northcliffe Press here, and then we'll have the Rothermere later. So it's all completely relevant to period as well.
Well, that's what I hoped. I mean, as you quite rightly pointed out about the Mycroft thing, and it was reading that section, it all sort of, because I knew I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something about truth. But when I read the Mycroft section, and it went, he is the British government, I went, got it.
Yep.
That all works. That now works. Perfect. Yeah.
Now, we've talked mostly about adaptation, but as we're coming to the end here, I was just going to ask you a bit about directing as well, because you're writer-director on this production. And what happens when you get into the rehearsal room? Are you one of these writers for whom the script is sacrosanct and nothing changes? Or is there a process that goes on once you get into the room?
No, I think there are, there's lots of different ways to skin that particular cat, but I've always been, if anybody in the room's had a better idea, and quite often they have, let's chuck it in. Like, you have to, I think when you're doing both jobs, you have to do one with an eye on the other.
Yeah.
So when I'm writing, I have to recognize if I've taken actor number 4 off, and I know that in the next scene I need them to play somebody else, then I know that there has to be a certain amount of time for them to get changed, but it can't just be filler. So I have to find a way to use that time actively, because otherwise you're just writing a load of dialogue to make sure that someone's got a different coat on. So so that's the writer thinking for the director, and then when you're a director, you're kind of working along and thinking, oh, actually now I'm looking at this and I'm seeing them doing it. They've conveyed that. I don't need this half a page. The stuff that we cut right down. And sometimes that's come from actor suggestions, or sometimes it's come from me. And we had the scene towards the end with the archivist, when Mrs. Hudson reveals the sketchbook. This will mean nothing to you yet, Paul, but eventually. We changed that so many times in the room.
Right.
From lots of different people. Pippa would throw an idea in, oh yeah, that's great, I'll try that, and and then Mark would say, oh, what if Holmes does this, or Gav, all 6 actors and our company stage manager, our company technical manager, all brilliant, great with ideas, absolute ideas factories, and it's been a joy. So it always comes back to trying to serve Doyle. Really.
Yeah. Now, you had a question for us.
I did.
What was your question for us?
I did. What happens to Mary? Well, the thing is, so in the early, obviously, in the Sign of Four, Mary Morstan turns up and Watson falls in love, then they get married, and then there's references to Mary. And then suddenly he's moved back in. There are, I mean, Conan Doyle probably just got sick of writing, oh, and then I had to go home to Mary, and he just thought, well, I'll just press on with the mysteries, that's what people want. I don't know it. Or maybe his editor cut her out. I've no idea, but I wondered whether or not there was a definitive answer about what happened to Mary.
Do you want me to try this one, Paul?
Shall we? I think we should both.
Go on.
You go first, then
I'll go back. All right, okay. So my view is that Conan Doyle just didn't care about continuity. He cared about telling a good story, and so at some point he just forgets what's happened in this continuity. I mean, there's definitely a reference later on to the fact that Watson has suffered a bereavement or a loss, and is separate. And then there is the famous second Mrs. Watson, who's referenced later if you follow the chronology. But if you follow the chronology or you take different chronological routes, you can end up with 6 Mrs. Watsons. So, so he's moving constantly backwards and forwards in. I think the other thing, though, is that Watson might not have been the best of husbands, and maybe he was trying to escape Mrs. Watson or had been kicked out, and he came back temporarily.
Yeah, I've wondered about that.
Well, what's your theory, Paul?
Well, basically, I think again it does come down to Doyle and the way the stories are. With Holmes comes back from the Reichenbach, and I think Doyle just thinks, well, Mrs. Watson, she's an inconvenience in terms of to have Watson having to. I've got to go off with Sherlock again. I'll see you later, my dear. All that would just become too much of a hassle. It works brilliantly in The Man with the Twisted Lip, where the story comes through Mary, as in Sign of 4. But it would just be too difficult to work around. I think so. I think he had the return of Holmes, said, right, this is a convenient time that Watson, she must have died or something, and Watson's now got this back in his life, and it's easier to write for these two characters when they're together. There's no excuses needed for Watson to take time off. Yeah, it's easy for him to get out of his medical practice because he always has a locum who he can call on. So I think it's a writer's decision.
It is
pure and simple.
And the other thing, of course, is the just as interesting is the question of whether or not there are 2 Dr. Watsons, since Mrs. Watson calls him James at one point instead of John.
That's true. And well, I mean, there's a couple of those. I mean, Watson, in the Study in Scarlet, says he was shot in the shoulder with a Giselle bullet.
Yeah.
It moves around.
And it's his leg. So yeah, I mean, I think he was peppered with shots.
He was.
Sonny Corleone at the toll booth. And the other one was Moriarty. I think is his name James, because in the final problem, it talks about the only reference in the newspaper was his brother James Moriarty writing about it.
Yes, I'm afraid this is Conan Doyle not really paying much attention, and nobody at the Strand picking him up on it either.
Yes,
but I don't know. Maybe the Moriarty father was just very unimaginative and called all his children James.
I did wonder that. There's a Dr. Seuss book called "Did I Ever Tell You About Mrs. McCabe, who had 23 sons and she named them all Dave?" I thought, maybe it's that.
Perfect.
It's Moriarty Senior. It's the easier way to remember your son's names. It's just give them all the same name.
They're all James.
They're all James. Now, before we finish, I have to ask you a quick question, which is what's coming next? Because the back of the programme had a very tantalising hint.
We're gonna do Hound of the Baskervilles. Now the thing is, it's been done a couple of times, but it's always been sent up. Because the story is so broad. There are so many strands to Baskervilles, and obviously you've got the hound with the flames coming out of its mouth and all that kind of thing, and I can imagine how easy it would be to parody. I've never seen any of the stage adaptations, but I know it's been parodied. I've got a couple of years, by the way, because next year they're doing Turn of the Screw, and that's not me. That's April D'Angelis. But I'm going to be doing prep for Baskervilles probably by next summer.
Wow. Okay.
And I want to start thinking about how to do it and not make it comedic.
Yeah.
You know, I don't mind, as you'll know from the other ones, you know, I don't mind having things that are humorous in there
Yeah.
because again, Doyle is very witty.
Mm.
It's a way to keep the mood up, and it helps an audience float along with the story. But you don't want to cross the line. And you know, and actually at its heart, it's a cracking. I mean, it's not supernatural as it turns out,
No.
but it has all of those elements. And I know that's something that Conan Doyle was fascinated by. So, you know, it'd be great to draw and make it quite spooky. That's in my head. That's what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
It's one of the debates around it is that when he started it and wrote to his mother saying, oh, I'm writing a story called Hand of Baskerville's a real creeper. And then he brings Holmes in later, and there's always that thing, was he intending just to write a gothic novel? And then he adds Holmes into it. So you've got both, your best of both worlds in the end.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Look, this has been absolutely brilliant to talk to you, Nick. It's been fantastic. And, you know, The Hunt for Moriarty is on tour now. It's on tour in the UK through to May. I think I should also mention that your script books are now available as well, aren't they?
Yes, yeah, they get sold. I would imagine they're available online, but certainly they're sold at the theatre. So if you come and see them, come and see a show, then they are available on the.
I think you can get them on the Blackeyed Theatre website as well. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes because obviously we've got a lot of listeners overseas who won't be able to get to see the performance and will be desperate to see it. But if you can't do it, pick up the script books because they're well worth getting as well. But congratulations on the current production and on the previous ones, and best of luck with the rest of the tour.
Thanks, guys. That's really kind.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, Nick. And I really look forward to seeing this in the spring.
Well, if I'm there when you come and see it, I'll say hello.
Oh, brilliant. Look forward to it. Okay.
Well, that was a really entertaining conversation with Nick. What a lovely guy. And he's doing such brilliant work with those adaptations of Sherlock Holmes, I think.
Yeah, really enjoyed that. It was great fun and some real insights come in there. And yeah, as you say, his adaptations have been great. And it's the fact that these are taking the work seriously, but they're still enjoyable and entertaining at the same time. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Hunt for Moriarty next year, definitely.
Yeah, and Baskerville after that. My goodness.
Oh yeah.
That's going to be
see
great.
that done straight will be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Paul, what have we got on the show next month?
Well, we've been discussing Holmes a lot today, and we'll be back to Holmes again for next month. We'll be discussing one of the best of the later stories, The Illustrious Client.
It is indeed one of the best. I think there's going to be very little criticism of that story, I suspect. So until then, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Goodbye. You're putting us on the spot with those hard questions.
Yes.
Children of the night, what a mess they make.